Hello, everybody, and welcome to the SoxProspects.com podcast, the web's #1 source for information on the Boston Red Sox from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Worcester, across the Pike to Fenway, and all stops in between. Thank you for listening. My name's Chris Hatfield. I'm the executive editor of Sox Prospects, and I'm joined this episode first by the regular host of the show, our director of scouting, a man who would not be caught dead wearing red and gray. Of course not. His name is Ian Cundall. Ian, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday brunch edition of the pod.
Hello, how is everyone doing this fine morning? And I say everyone because thankfully there's someone other than Chris here today.
You're so nice to me. Yeah, we've got a 3-man booth this morning. We are joined by a man who knows that there are, in fact, 2 types of ham. He's the editor-in-chief of SoxProspects.com. He is Mike Andrews. Mike, what remind us, what are those 2 types of ham again? I need a refresher every now and then.
Happy to join you. The 2 types of hams are the ham you have and the ham you lack.
The ham you lack, exactly. And shout out to the 5 people who get that, that are listening.
The people who have been with the site since 2004.
The old heads love it. We got a lot to talk about this morning. We've got updated rankings. We've got some light transactions, nothing heavy, but promotion season looks like it's about to hit in full force. We're going to have a few weeks of guys moving all around. All-Star break is approaching. The Boston Red Sox might be good. So there's that, as we've been kind of foreshadowing for weeks, but we'll see what happens today, but they're looking pretty good right now. So we've got plenty to discuss. But before we do that, first, if you want to support the show, a few ways you can do that. Spread the word, tell a friend, tell a relative, tell your neighbor, tell jokey person, topical within brackets in your script. Tell the third person on your Zoom call, the third person who logs into the next Zoom call you're on.
Third wheel.
Tell them about it. What's that?
Third wheel.
Third wheel. Exactly. Yes. When you're out on a date and that weird cousin shows up and sits at your table. You can also help us by rating and reviewing on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to the show. And of course, the donation drive is live. The Sox Prospects donation drive. Mike, sorry to put you on the spot here with this, but do we have like a progress update on the donation drive? Our goal is $10,000 this year.
If you're a reader or listener, you might remember we run this every June and July. We try to get about $10,000 and have hit that goal about every year. We're at about 71% as of this morning. So doing really well. I think we've gotten somewhere around 130, 140 donations so far, averaging about $45. So thank you so much to everyone who already donated.
Yep, for sure. And don't feel like you've got to, don't feel like it's like $300 or bust or anything crazy like that. Like, you want to chip in a few bucks, we appreciate it. Like, it's like tipping your server. We talked about being the third wheel at dinner. If you want to just throw us a few bucks, we appreciate that. It helps cover firsthand coverage, travel costs for scouting, our general IT costs, such as hardware, software, internet costs, hosting fees, etc. So we appreciate whatever you're able and willing to pitch in to the donation drive again. And that website is www.soxprospects.com/donate. There's also a link on the website at the top. I believe we've got the donate link at the top. And of course, as always, it's patreon.com/soxprospects. If you're more into the per episode pledge sort of support, you can support us there. And we really appreciate that. If you can hop on there and support the show. And I guess maybe we'll start doing the shout outs to the new Patreon supporters at the top of the show. Tom Kutzer is our newest $5 level supporter. So Tom, thank you for supporting us on patreon.com/SoxProspects.
I think we got a new one this morning. James Van Hoff.
James Van Hoff. Nice. James, thank you. Appreciate it. I love it. Good job checking, Mike. I checked like a couple days ago. So love it. Love to see the new supporters coming in. And of course, if you want to hit us up with your emails, it's podcast@soxprospects.com, because we want to talk about what you all want to hear about. And I'm presuming the number one thing that everyone wants to hear about is Trey Wingenter. Obviously, no, that's the late breaking news last night, a very minor sort of trade, but it hasn't been the busiest couple of weeks, or I guess week. It hasn't been super duper long since our last episode. Not a ton happening transaction-wise, fellas. Promotions have been fairly quiet, like one minor backup catcher chain promotion in Drew Earhart and Juan Montero. But transactions had been fairly quiet until last night. We got this trade where the Red Sox traded with Detroit for right-handed reliever Trey Wingenter, sending out 2023 6th-round pick CJ Weens, who had been in the bullpen in Salem in 19 appearances, 4.81 ERA. He did have 29 strikeouts, but 16 walks and 24 and a third innings. So good K rate, walk rate a little high, had been a little hittable. The thing to that trade, as Chris Cotillo reported, was that Wingenter had a assignment clause that he had activated, and apparently it's a 40-man assignment clause, as he had reported. For those who forget, an assignment clause is basically if Detroit was not going to put Wingenter on their 40-man roster, Wingenter had the right to activate his clause, and any team in MLB that was willing to put him on the 40-man, Detroit had to let him go. If there were multiple teams, which appears that there were, then Detroit could take the best trade, but did have to move him. And so that's how you get guys like, Weens as a low A reliever being the trade exchange for Wingenter, because, a guy activating an assignment clause isn't going to get a huge return necessarily. Strikes me, guys, as potential just MLB relief depth. I could see him going straight to the Bronx, maybe, given how gassed the bullpen is. I know Cora said they don't think they need anyone, but or he could just go to AAA. I don't know if either of you have thoughts on Trey Wingenter, as minor a deal as that is, but it is kind of the latest breaking news on the transaction front. I guess, Ian, you got anything on Wingenter or what you think the deal is there?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to go to the Red Sox because they have an off day tomorrow. So I don't get why you'd bring someone in for one day. That just doesn't really strike me as necessary. If you look, Anderson finished that game yesterday, so they have plenty of arms that are in a good enough spot, as Cora said. So I don't think he'll be coming up. But it's a flyer. He's got good size. He's like 6'7". He's got a big fastball.
Big dude.
It's a bad shape. Average is it's like a mid-high 90s fastball, but it's below average IVB, and it was getting destroyed in AAA. Like, I think hitters have a 537 slug against this fastball with the 57% hard hit rate. So that's really bad, as you can tell. His slider is decent. Apparently added a splitter this year. Sounds like someone that they want to get in the pitching lab, kind of see what they can take. He's got good velo, so if they can harness the slider and the splitter, especially when you got a guy who's 6'7", maybe they can kind of unlock something there. He does have a lot of MLB experience. Like, he's got over 4 years of service time. So
this is a guy. 4 years, really?
Yeah,
interesting.
He's made the majors back in 2018 with San Diego, and he was in the majors for all of for part of 2019, and 51 appearances in 2019. This year too. So that service. Oh, right. They got service time during the COVID year. Forgot that. But anyway,
87 innings, major league innings pitched.
Yeah. So, he's
entering this year, 4 years. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. So his numbers in AAA are okay.
Wow.
Weens, as you said, it's probably a data flyer type for the Tigers.
Exactly.
His fastball, some good characteristics. It's got like 18 inches of IVB. And has missed bats. It's got a decent, whiff rate down, but it's low A. He's a 23-year-old reliever. So, or he might be 24 actually by now. But it's not, for the Red Sox. The odds are at best case Weens develops into like an organizational arm. So I think if Winggartner's someone you like, and the pitching dev staff or the analysts or someone really wants to take a shot on, then I completely understand why you'd be willing to trade Weens for him.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that they're going to need to make room on the 40-man for him. So either they're making another move or they're trading someone. So it's a, definitely someone they're interested in. It's not just kind of
couldn't they 60-day Brian Mata at some point? Like, he's been out way more than 60 days.
Mata has to get activated in like a week. And if you 60-day him now, he gets the whole service time for the whole year, I believe.
Oh, okay. Then maybe that's why you wouldn't do it. But yeah. I don't know then.
MLB would probably. Well, I guess I've seen teams do that.
I guess he's getting the service time anyways.
Yeah, he's getting the service time anyway. I could see that. I guess I could see them doing that, but it's you're kicking the can 1 week down the road. I don't know. If it's the difference between DFAing Naoki Uwasawa today versus over the All-Star break. I don't know. I guess it buys you a week if you're trying to like move someone like a Dahlbeck or something. Maybe, I don't know. Although I don't even know what you're going to do there. So, interesting. Anything else on the Wingenter move, Mike? You got anything you wanted to throw in, or no?
Right. PDA reported that he was in Columbus yesterday or something like that, so he couldn't make it to the Bronx if needed to. But I think Ian's right that it probably is not needed for one game.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, cool. Otherwise, not a ton happening transaction wise. News wise, I guess the fact that Yoel Cespedes, after being promoted to Salem, still hasn't made his debut, as Mike said before we started recording. What was it, the 21st?
He
Was the
hasn't played since the 21st.
Yeah, and we're recording this on the morning of July the 7th, with Salem off today and tomorrow, so he's not going to play his next game until at least the 9th. So he's been out for a minute. Left hand soreness is what I was told. The injury is. It's interesting because he got promoted, was in the lineup on that Tuesday, and got scratched before the game. So it's something that seems to have flared up. That first day he was in Salem, got put on the injured list officially this week, more just as a procedural thing. Doesn't really mean anything new. He's pretty much eligible to come off as soon as Tuesday, I believe. So
got put on the 3rd. So the 3rd, we'll get to Tuesday or Wednesday. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, because he hadn't played. So I think you can do a retroactive 3 days, right? Because they did it. I think the way they're doing it is when they put the transaction in on the 5th, but I think a couple of those, like Salem and Greenville, are putting the transaction in as though it happened that 2 days ago, as opposed to being retroactive 2 days. It's weird. Anyway, but yeah, he's eligible to come off soon. It's just whether or not he's healthy. No real news on that. And the other thing, I guess, that I noted transaction wise is that there's been a set of moves where, I mean, when we talk about the development list, and as we've mentioned, it's basically they added this essentially to replace the phantom injured list, where a guy would get a right calf strain and go on the injured list whenever the team needed to clear a roster spot and didn't want to, release someone or move someone around or what have you. So this made a lot more sense. You didn't have to fake an injury. You could put a guy on the development list. And a lot of the time it's used for example, the team's third catcher, right? Like, Matt Donlin has been on it in Portland, and Mark Kolosbury in Worcester, and Drew Erhard was on it in Greenville and now is in Portland as kind of the spare catcher. Or you'll have kind of, the last reliever in the bullpen when they need a roster spot for 4 days, they'll put him on the dev list. But the Red Sox have been putting, for example, recently, they put Ryan Zefferjon on the dev list. They put Chris Olivares in Portland on the dev list. They put who else in AAA? There was one more. Oh, Luis Guerrero. Yeah, in Worcester. On the dev list. They just put Felix Cepeda in Portland on the dev list yesterday, who's been their closer. It's interesting to me because this struck me, and we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, as an opportunity to get these guys a break and to get them in the pitching lab. And I think it's a really interesting use of that. Yes, in part, it helps to clear the roster spot when they need it and be able to keep more depth on these rosters. But I think it's part of seeing the focus transition from all development happens in games to there's a lot of development, particularly for pitchers, that can happen in the lab while they're in bullpens, while they're, throwing sides, et cetera, and understanding that it doesn't necessarily have to be in the games that this development happens. So I don't know if it's really been kind of a sea change from the focus we've seen a lot in the past. I mean, Mike, I guess having the most sort of time, like background, looking back at this, I think to me, it's a positive development. I don't know if you have thoughts on this kind of way they're doing this with like that and the skips with the starters and that sort of thing this year. That really, it's to me, it's showing thought into how you develop a pitcher.
Yeah, I guess to me, back in the day, if you were put on the Phantom, it was a DL then. So Phantom DL, it was kind of like a death knell that, like, all right, the team doesn't have any respect for you. You're just around because we want we need somebody in case XYZ player gets hurt in an emergency. And you had to be on it for 7 days. And it was not really a flexible move. Where the dev list, you can be on it. It's supposed to be 7 days, but anytime there's another move on the system, you can, like, the 7 days can be up. You can do it after 3 days. If you're on the dev list in Worcester and somebody gets called to Boston, I think that they can just nix the dev list and you can get activated. So it's kind of nice. I think you're spot on. It's probably just hey, go spend some time in the lab, get your head straight. You're not going to pitch in games for a week, but go work on some stuff on the side. And it's not that, like, taboo anymore that it's a huge deal that the team doesn't like you anymore. I mean, obvious to us because we have Zefferjon ranked, we have Guerrero ranked, we have Cepeda ranked. Those are good prospects. And it's not just these guys are nobodies now because they went on the dev list.
And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think when they first brought in the dev list, I think the player had to consent to being put on the dev list, right? And they
Yeah,
got
I
rid of that
think
this CBA.
I want to say that's correct.
Yeah.
Having read both CBAs. I don't remember it word for word, but I'm pretty sure that's correct.
Yeah, which is you know, I think that's part of, we're going to use this as an, it's called the development list. Let's use it for development and not just roster shenanigans.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ian, any thoughts on kind of that's kind of sea change in how they're working with these guys and using those sort of roster moves to help with development?
Not really. I mean, I think it's just the way the game's going that it's just arguably just as important what's going on off the field as it is on the field. And I think that's something the Red Sox are really emphasizing this year, across all positions and all levels. You know, we've heard a lot about how they've switched up like pregame routines, the way they're kind of developing players in general, just with a lot of more individualized training. And I think that's just an extension of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Oh, I guess one other minor roster or transactional move is the Red Sox released catcher Roberto Perez. He had been in Fort Myers rehabbing, and I guess their team really liked the way he was working with pitchers, but just, you know, they have a lot of catching depth in AAA now. Like we were talking beforehand, if Teal gets promoted to Worcester, they're going to have 5 catchers in Worcester, unless they like sent someone down correspondingly to Portland, which I guess is possible. But yeah, they've got catching depth up there. And did they say anything about like the recovery from injury? Like, was he healthy at this point, or was it still? I forget. I remember seeing something about that move, but it just
Yeah, he was supposed to get close in late June. I think it was going a little slower than noted. Unfortunately, I deleted my notes after he got released, which is probably stupid. But
no, that was definitely what I was told. Is that they were hoping for that kind of late June timeframe, and then
I mean, I think he probably could re-sign somewhere else.
yeah.
Uh, but I mean, they just don't have a need for him with 4 catches there now and possibly 5 coming soon.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, they're hitting, you know, you look at like Mickey Gasper. Mickey Gasper hit cleanup yesterday for that lineup. Like they like what he's doing. He's not catching every day, but like Tyler Heineman is the catcher who's on the 40-man roster who's in Worcester, and he's not even playing regularly, even though he's the guy on the 40-man who's the 3rd catcher for MLB. So yeah, I just didn't need that depth. All right, moving along, guys. A couple of things that we've got on the agenda here today. One thing that we've kind of previewed a little bit, but you know, look, this month we've got the draft coming up, which I think we'll kind of maybe preview in our next episode. You know, we've got the end of the Florida Complex League season is coming up. The regular season ends on July the 25th, but the FCL Red Sox are in the playoff hunt, so that could extend that season by up to a week. 4 teams make the playoffs. It's a 1-game semifinal followed by a best of 3 championship series. So it can probably extend that to about the end of the month. But when the FCL ends, I presume they're going to want to move some guys up from the FCL to keep them playing, move them up to Salem. You look at the Franklin Arias types, for example. Can't imagine, and a couple pitchers that I'm sure we're going to talk about when we get to the rankings. But we're about to see a bunch of promotions. And with the way they changed things this year, to me, it almost seems like they're taking a lot of the transactions that used to happen in the off season, and to some degree, like guys moving up to the next level and that sort of thing. And a lot of that seems to being shifted to the middle of the year now. Between you're going to have draftees entering the system that have to be counted on the domestic reserve list. You're going to have FCL ending early and you want to move those guys up. It seems like a lot of guys are going to get pushed up and correspondingly going to have to make some room on the domestic reserve list. Between a 2-day break for all minor league teams this weekend because of the way they shifted the schedule for the 4th of July and fireworks days and stuff. The All-Star break being 4 games. And, you know, we talked about the Futures game, which all of the big 3 are participating in some manner right before the All-Star break, followed by the end of the FCL season at the end of the month. We're about to have a lot of promotions. And I feel everyone loves promotion talk. They love, when's this guy going to move up? Figure maybe we could go lightning round with some guys that you all think could be on their way up, could be on their way to seeing the next level. Ian, I know you specifically had some guys top of mind that you thought might be moving soon. So I guess we'll start with you. Who are some guys do you think we could see moving in the very near future, whether it's this weekend, next weekend, or at the end of the month, as part of this kind of? I think it's over a dozen guys we're going to wind up seeing moving.
Well, I mean, mathematically, eventually it is going to have to be that because assuming, let's say they draft and sign the average number of guys, that's 14 is kind of
Mhm.
what they've been doing the last few years. And so if
Yep.
you're bringing
Average is
14
actually,
guys,
and the actual average is actually 20 over the last 4 years
but that's
between
skewed.
signings and UDFAs. Yeah,
Oh, you do UDFAs. I was just thinking of draftees because I have a feeling I kind of wonder if there just
they
isn't
might.
going to be a big
Might be less than that.
UDFA market anymore because of this.
Just throwing
Um,
out there that that's the average over the last 4 years. So that's a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm it's gonna be interesting, the UDFA thing. Maybe that's a discussion for the draft preview or post view episode. But I think that the first group I'm watching and like beyond the big three, who we'll probably talk about them in the futures game and all that other stuff in a little bit. But the guys to watch I'm watching are the Salem pitchers. I think you look at Elmer Rodriguez is repeating the level. Like he was there
Mhm.
all last year. He's been pretty good, a little inconsistent. His last start was, or 2 starts ago was great. His last start was a little iffy, but I think overall his stuff has gotten to the point where he probably needs to get pushed up a level. Um, then also Noah Dean is someone who's been dominating lately. He had another outing where I don't think he gave up a hit in his last outing, and he's basically just last 2 starts and frankly since the beginning of May, um, he's just been on fire. He hasn't given up really any. He's not giving up any hits. He's striking a bunch of guys out. He's cut the walks down considerably. Like in his last 38 and 2/3 innings, 14 hits allowed, 15 walks, 52 strikeouts. In his last 2 starts, 10 innings, 1 hit, 3 walks, 17 strikeouts, no runs, or 1 earned run, excuse me. So he's been really good lately. Definitely deserving of a promotion, especially given he's another guy who spent the entire year there last year. And then I look at like someone like Jojo Ingracia, who he's a little older. He's doing kind of what I'd expect the guy with his arsenal to do in Salem, but at some point you got to push that guy up to Greenville. I mean, he's got 79 strikeouts in 49 innings. The stuff is a little fringy, but he's a college reliever like that who's now transitioning to starting. That type of guy belongs in high A with the current state of the minor league rosters. Low A is just not very good, so it's time for those guys to get a new challenge.
Yeah, and I think like Dean and Rodriguez were like fighting to be our pitcher of the month for June, and it wound up going to Rodriguez. So yeah, that would seem to pretend moving up. Mike, any names that stick out to you that could be moving up this month?
Yeah, so I mean Ian's right. There's a ton of pitchers in Salem that should be in Greenville. There's probably at least 5, probably more than that. So I guess I'm going to go with you got to make room in Greenville to make room for those Salem pitchers. So the 2 guys I'm looking at are Connolly Early, was last year's 5th round pick. He's pitching really well in Greenville. He's 22 years old, 3.53 ERA, showing fairly good control, 63 innings in Greenville. So I think he has the potential to move up to Portland. And then Cade Feeney in Greenville as well, who was last year's 13th round pick, has 32 strikeouts and only 2 walks in 32 innings out of the Greenville bullpen. So he's somebody that might have potential to move up to Portland. And then I know we're not going to get too much into the big three. It seems like they're all going to probably get promoted sometime this year. It's just a matter of when. I think just worth noting that Myers just on the cusp of hitting 500 plate appearances at Double-A. So that could be a threshold. But like Chris said, there's a lot of different time periods over the next month where things can happen. There's this 2-day window right now where there's no games going on. Futures game is the 13th. The draft ends on the 16th. FCL ends somewhere between July 25th and August 1st, and then the signing deadline is July 30th. So any one of those times is when prospects could get promoted. So it's kind of fun to watch every one of those thresholds over the next month.
Well, and also there's a pretty big gap for the All-Star break. Like Portland, for example, plays on the 14th and then doesn't play again until the 19th.
They all have 4 days off.
Yeah,
every team has those 4 days off,
except for the FCL. I don't.
Well, not the complexes.
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
I meant the full season affiliates. That's a fair point. Yep.
So I think that stretch is also like kind of right after the futures game. We could see a decent amount of action. And I think one thing relevant on Early is he had another really good start last night, 5 innings, 2 hits, 2 walks, no runs, 8 strikeouts. So he's shown really, there's still a lot to work there, projection wise with him, but his changeup is good enough that he's kind of can just get by dominating with that pitch. So he's
Mhm.
someone who might need a new challenge, as Mike's suggested.
Yeah, a few other pitchers that I would throw out there. We talk about if you move one guy, you might have to move others up. Hunter Dobbins in Portland has been really good lately. Has been in Portland, I think, since mid last year. I could see him getting pushed up to Worcester in the month of June. In 26 innings, he struck out 25 and only walked 9. 381 ERA. Another guy that I think is pretty likely if they need to make room in Greenville to move up to Portland is Hayden Mullins. In June in 22 innings, he struck out 33 and walked 4. He's been phenomenal in June. I easily could see him moving up to Portland as well. And then some of those older guys like Michael Sansone is a random, he's a piggybacker. He's part of this group that they brought in like spring training of signings. He, as a piggyback guy, was also kind of in contention for our pitcher of the month for June. And again, some of these guys, they're like 23, 24, 25. Get him up to Greenville and see what's there. And he's kind of in that group for me. On the hitting side, I think what we're going to see more with the position players, because we haven't really mentioned them, I think a lot of that might wait until the FCL ends, because I think what you're going to have is you've got guys in the FCL in Franklin Arias who jumped into our top 20 this month in our rankings that they're going to want to move up. Some other guys like Andrew Musset, potentially I could see them maybe wanting to move up, and it's to keep these guys playing in games. You have to, right? Maybe some other position players that want to move up to Salem. I think you're going to see a lot of promotions that will confuse people because the back of the baseball card stats of those hitters aren't going to look great just because they need to make room. Salem, if Cespedes gets healthy, just has too many infielders. So I could see Marvin Alcantara just having to move up to Greenville to make room. If they need to make that room. Recall last year we saw Mikey Romero and Cutter Coffee promoted from Salem to Greenville, and we were all like, that's interesting because the numbers didn't look great. So don't be surprised if there are a few promotions like that of guys that either don't really look like they have the numbers for a promotion or haven't had them for very long. So,
but it's not just with the numbers though, because like we talked about that Roman Anthony wasn't doing anything in Salem, but everything like these are guys who, when you see them, they don't look like they're ready for a promotion. But just with the way minor league baseball is now, with the limited rosters and also the quality of competition, at some point you just kind of have to push guys up, especially in the lower minors.
For sure. Yeah.
It's not just the back of the baseball card stats with those guys. Like there are guys that actually don't look ready, but you still have to promote them anyway, just because of the math game.
I talked to someone last year who was talking about low A almost as being like complex north. And I think that's especially going to be the case when the FCL ends, because so many complex league players are going to get promoted to low A just to keep them playing, that you're just going to see a bunch of guys, and not just with the Red Sox, pushed up the ladder. Because if you're not in Greenville yet as this player that's been in full season ball since mid last year, you got to go. You got to get moving. So Mike, you're leaning in, it looks like. Oh no! All right, just very interested, and I know I'm super interesting.
Well, but can I say one thing though?
Of course, yeah.
There's a math. I am a little following. There's going to be a math problem with pitching though, which is why I'm kind of wondering if like guys like Sansone might not get promoted.
Sure, there's too many guys in Salem to promote all of them.
Salem needs starters. Like if they're going to promote Dean Rodriguez and let's say Ingracia. Mm-hmm. They're going to have to move guys into the starting rotation there. And if you look at the FCL, I just don't think they have guys who are ready to fill those roles yet. And so that's why I think what's more likely to happen is like guys like Sansone, Kerwin, and O'Donnell or whatever are going to end up having to just move into the rotation because they need guys there. Like
sure, O'Donnell was a guy that came to mind.
They have to fill Salem innings, and so like that's why like kind of the fringier guys might just end up spending the entire season there. Whereas they're going to have to promote. They're more likely to promote out the guys that are like kind of more on the prospect radar.
And it's interesting to me too, because I wonder how many guys they're going to promote out of the FCL on the pitching side, because we're probably about to talk about Juan Valera and Jefferson Vargas.
I don't think it's that many because it's not a very good team. Like, let's be honest.
There are, but those two are good. But again, it's like, and this is a question, it's not a rhetorical point. Is it better to have guys still in Fort Myers working in quote unquote the lab and throwing live BPs to the hitters that are down there, et cetera? Or is it better to push them to Salem and play in real games?
Well,
it's going to be different for each guy. Is it different for an Australian like Adam Bates than it is for, an 18-year-old guy out of the Latin program, out of the DSL coming up to move up? It might just be a different calculus for different guys.
it's also they're not going to be playing games down there. Like they're going to be scrimmaging the Twins probably every day.
It's going to be
So,
extended spring training.
yeah,
It's just
so
after.
there's
Yeah.
they still are going to be playing games. There just aren't going to be stats for them. They're not going to be official games. So
Mhm.
like
That's fair.
that's it's not like the guys when
Although-
the FCL season ends are never going to play another game this season. Like they're still going to be playing for the next couple of months. Or next couple of whatever until September. It's just it won't be official games.
Do we know that? And the only reason I ask is because, like, remember how like the fall instructional league just became like teams didn't want to play each other anymore, and so now it's just essentially a camp. Like,
I mean, when it was reported that the schedule was changing,
Did they
like
say that?
it was basically said there was going to be like a tricky league going on down there.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I would
which
assume
makes
that's
sense.
still
You've
the
got so
plan,
many
because
guys.
it just it doesn't make sense. You can't promote everyone, and there's no point in you're not going to shut all these guys down in end July. Like that just
Mhm.
doesn't make sense.
I do wonder how much of the needing to make room for the domestic reserve list is going to be some of those sort of bullpen types in the complex, though, because they have some, 19, 20, 21-year-old guys that are down there in the bullpen that are just kind of there to help finish games and that sort of thing. I just wonder how many arms they're going to have down there, too. Are you going to be playing like 4 or 5 inning games some days? But fair point. That's a very good point. All right. The other bit of news, I guess, that we got this past week is not terribly surprising, but I mentioned the big three in the futures game already, but maybe to get into that a little bit more. Kyle Teal and Marcelo Meyer will be participating in the futures game this year at the All-Star game, which is it New York? No, where's the All-Star game this year? I can't even remember where.
Texas.
Texas, that's right. Down in, at the Rangers. Okay. Down in Arlington. Kyle Teal and Marcelo Meyer will be participating in the futures game, and Roman Anthony will be down there as well. He's not going to be playing in the game, but he's going to be participating in this. They have this new skills challenge this year that he'll be participating in. And what exactly? Why don't we tell the folks exactly what that is for folks who haven't been locked in and paying attention on what the skills challenge is? But
well, it's the skills showcase is the official title of it, and okay, this is going to be a callback. If you remember,
I know exactly where you're
NBA's
going with this, and
5,
I love it.
There was like a hitting game competition in there, and it seems a lot like that. And basically the idea of it is there's a round of hit it here, which is you have to hit targets. And I remember in that game, you just like have to hit tractors and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
Ramps. I hope they have the ramps.
But so basically there's 3 rounds. The first round is hit it here, which is as I said, there's going to be targets on the field, and they have 10 swings, and they get a different points for each target. Either by hitting them on the fly or on the bounce. And apparently this is going to be great. There's going to be a bunting target where they have to land the ball directly in it, where they get points for that, which is, it's funny, but before games, will see guys, they'll set up like cones and stuff, and they'll have to like bunt. This is more during spring training.
Yeah.
But you have to like bunt it through the cone or whatever. So that's the first round. The second round is call your shot. And this is, they have 10 swings, and they have to call whether they're going to hit it to left, center, or right field. And you have to do all of them. And once you do all of them, then you can go to any of the remaining directions. You just have to call it, obviously. And then the third round is swing for the fences, and it's basically home run derby. But the wrinkle is if you go oppo, it's 2x points. So it's pretty good. This will be a good, test to see if guys are confident going the other way, or if they'd rather just kind of grip it and rip it full side. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting. It's a good way to get more prospects involved, which I think is the most important thing. And I know some people were kind of disappointed Anthony didn't make the team, but it seems like I don't think other than they weren't going to put more than 2 guys.
There's only so many spots. Yeah.
And they want to represent every team. So it was just a math game, and he kind of got left with carrying this, but it's good that they got him involved, and it's going to be fun. I mean, there's some good guys participating in it, like Sebastian Walcott, who's one of the Rangers' probably the Rangers' top prospect, is in it. Brooks Lee was supposed to be in it, but he's too busy hitting over 400 in the majors in his first week. Termarr Johnson's a pretty big prospect with the Pirates. Same with Brady House with the Nationals. So should be fun, and it's a nice way to get guys to get more guys involved in the futures game thing. Especially since I don't know if they're doing 7 or 9 innings again, but in a 7-inning game, it was just like guys were getting 1 plate appearance, whatever. So this will be a good way to get more names involved.
Yeah, Mike, the futures game always is kind of a nice recognition of what the top of the system looks like. I mean, I know you and I can probably remember, John Haddig being selected for the futures game back when it was the U.S. versus the world. And they're like, oh, we've got a guy from Guam. Although I guess technically that would be a U.S. territory. But there's some years I can remember when the All-Star game was in DC, Brian Mata was the only Red Sox selected. And now we've got the Red Sox getting 3 guys selected essentially. So it seems to be a good barometer of where things are at historically.
I mean, I don't have anything to add. I mean, I agree that what my memories of it are usually there was one world player and one U.S. player, and
Back
it
in the
wasn't
day.
always the 2 best prospects in the system. But it was always fun with somebody trying to find a player from a country that could be represented to take up viewership there. So that's always been kind of fun. But I think it'll be cool having the big 3 there this year.
Yeah,
Yeah, because it's
yeah. Go
well,
ahead.
they also now it's ALNL anyway, so
Right.
they got
Right.
rid of the which I
Right.
thought I agree. I prefer. I thought it's
It
tricky
was
'cause
fun.
The
but-
ALNL lets you get better prospects in, but the
Mhm.
World versus US is kind of I thought was more fun almost. But I mean, I honestly, it's weird in a weird way. It's almost better for pitchers because a lot of the times, especially if they're not in a Statcast league, this is your first opportunity really to get to see like for there to be publicly available Statcast data on the guys.
Mhm.
But with the hitters, like that's not as big a deal. I think it's more just, it's a good level of competition for a lot of these guys. They're going to be facing some of the top prospect arms in the minors. So it'd be good to see how Meyer and Teal kind of stack up against some of those guys.
It's funny. I was thinking about this last night, and Ovis Portes, who is apparently the first player ever signed out of Antigua and Barbuda, like he would have been a lock
for
the
MLB
futures
or for
game.
the Red Sox.
For apparently all of professional baseball.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Good for
I
him.
mean,
I didn't know
I
that.
found I was updating a scouting report on the website last night because you did an update on it, and I was throwing in career notes, and I had to word it as like reportedly is the first, because Lord knows I haven't done the legwork to confirm this, but yeah, he would have been a lock for the futures game in the old format because they would have been all over that. Anyway, but yeah, so that'll be fun. That'll be, and that's on the 13th, right? You said, Ian, the futures game. Because the All-Star break is the 15th through the 18th.
No, it's the 14th.
The 14th. Yeah, that's right. Because they play the futures game the day before while they're still major.
Oh, wait, no, it is the 13th. Excuse me. It's the 13th, but they're not, this is weird. They're not broadcasting the skills challenge until the 14th for some reason.
So the skills challenge is on the 13th. The game is on the 14th?
No, both are on the 13th. I think the game will be live, but the skills challenge will air on tape delay on the 14th, which doesn't make any sense to me.
Luckily, those results, no one will know anything about what happened because no one will be in attendance recording it or anything like that.
So I don't know why they're doing that, but
silly.
but the game is on the 13th, as Mike said.
Okay, cool, nice. Well, keep an eye out for that. That's next week. See the big 3 in action, live on your TV screen, coming to a park near you soon. All right, rankings. Everyone loves a good rankings update, gentlemen. We had another big one this month in the July update. Some movement, maybe not quite the drastic movement we saw last month with some guys, although there were some pretty big jumps lower in the 60. But a good month of jumps nonetheless, and some interesting guys to talk about. To me, the kind of clear headliner here for everyone involved right now is you've got the big 3, and then it's what to do with Christian Campbell. Campbell entered the month at number 10 in our rankings. He moves up this month to number 5, and I'm kind of glad we have this group here, this cross section of folks, because there's some disagreement on where to put him. I think we all more or less agreed. Maybe we didn't, but for me at least, it seems that you've got your big 3, and there's a tier behind them of 3 or 4 guys, depending on how you want to look at it, of Campbell, Miguel Bleis, Luis Perales, Yoelis Cespedes in some order. I think that seems relatively clear for me. I think we're in rough agreement on that. It's just then how to order them. Everyone agreed at Cespedes 7th, and Mike always has the disclaimer every month of just because a guy moves up or down 1 or 2 spots doesn't really necessarily mean a lot. I think Cespedes moving down 1 is more Campbell moving up than anything. You've got Perales with Tommy John now. You've got Campbell moving up. You've got Bleis, who just moved up to Greenville, struggling a little bit there. Did just hit his first home run the other night. Trying to figure out how to order them. We put Campbell 5 as a group. Not a unanimous decision. Let me go with Ian first on putting him 5, and then Mike will go to you on why that really grinds your gears. No, why you had him 4th on your list and why you think he goes 4. So Ian, what were you thinking? What was in your kind of decision to put Bleis 4, Campbell 5?
I think it's really close. I think that I kind of came down. It was funny. I was hoping to see Campbell this week, and naturally, I get a
He
suspended
got
game,
rained
and
out.
then he doesn't play the next day. Because they continue the suspended game, so they just play the same lineup. So I go up for 2 days and don't see him. But I don't know. He's one of the hardest guys we've had to rank in some time, and
Mhm.
it's I go in there and I see him, and when I watch as good as the numbers are, it's weird. Like it just still doesn't look right, and there's still questions. Like I've seen him, like he'll get like a triple, and it's like a bloop down the line. It's like that's not really like a good swing or anything, but I mean, he's very good at finding open space, and um, I think that it's just you look at the advanced data and it's really good. Like there's no way, and he's improved as the season got on, and that's the thing that caused me to jump him from 10 to 5 was, the biggest thing, the struggle so far this year was like in zone whiff rate. He was just missing a lot on pitches in the zone because when he hacks, he really gets after it, and we've seen it. Like he really, it's a max effort swing. Like he's leaving it all out there every time, and he's cut it down in Double A. Like it's gone the opposite way against better pitching. It's gone down, and so that was enough for me to push him up there. But I still don't know what his long term defensive position is. He's playing center field. I don't think he's great out there. He's probably a second baseman. They even tried him at shortstop lately, which granted partially was due to Meyer being injured, but
Yeah, Meyer got hurt and missed 4 games, and they started Campbell at short 3 days in a row, which
well,
was
so I
wild.
was the first day they played Paulinho there, and I think he had 2 errors. And then they flipped to Campbell after that, and he didn't look great there, from what I was told. Like which understandable, he hasn't played shortstop since he signed, and then they throw
Yeah.
him out there. But I kind of wonder if that's more like they know he doesn't really have a position, so let's try him at another spot to expand his positional versatility.
Hmm.
But I think he's probably a second baseman. But then it's like, okay, so he's a second baseman. Offensively, still questions about how it's going to translate against MLB pitching. And so I just wonder, I still think Blaze has more upside is really what it comes down to. And as good as Campbell's been, and it's the same thing. I think it was Josh Norris from Baseball America like made the point, and this is the same thing I've been hearing. Is like you talk to scouts and they're still lukewarm on him. Like it doesn't matter what he does. It's weird. It like he's one of these few guys that it's like as good as it looks, it's still like I need to see it against better competition. And I can understand having seen him. Like as I said, it's really weird, and it doesn't look natural like what he's doing, and you're gonna have those questions all the way up. And so as good as he's been, I still think I just need to see. I'm gonna need to see it to believe it. And the defensive thing is kind of holding it back too for me, though. It's not just an offensive profile. Like when you're evaluating guys, especially near the top of the system, you have to consider the entire like all of their tools. And I just think I'm not sure what his defensive profile, nor I'm also not sure that the speed is gonna hold. That was something a scout who saw him recently mentioned is they're not sure like if he's even going to end up being like an average runner. So there's like it's when you get the with guys like this, you're really nitpicking things. But I think that there's still some areas that he can improve or to kind of raise his prospect stock as he continues to develop in Double A.
Yeah, I mean, he's hitting the snot out of the ball, absolutely. But it's like you said,
Well,
it's not just that it looks funny. It's things like we've been talking about internally, like when he takes a pitch, like there's swing, 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 don't swing, which is how you're taught rather than don't swing, don't swing, don't swing, then swing. But at the same time, it's like he is about to throw the bat through the zone before he stops. Like he's
well, and that's why like Scott, there are scouts who wonder is like is approach actually good, or is he's goes up there and he's going to swing at everything and then decides at the very last second, like is he actually picking the ball up, or is it more like guessing? Like
and can he
hey,
get away
this
with that? Because maybe he can. Like
yeah.
who knows?
But
Um,
but as I said, like the zone contact stuff improving is really encouraging because it was not at a great number in Greenville, but now it's getting better in Portland, which is not how it usually works out. So
mhm, mhm.
that's nice. And I think with Blyce, and I think Mike probably has some thoughts on this. I understand the numbers aren't great in Greenville, but he's still, he just turned 20 years old. Or he turned 20 years old at the beginning of the season. So he's going to play the entire season at 20. He's 2 years younger than Campbell. Um, there's time. He gets time, and I just think the tools there. Even if he's not showing it necessarily in Greenville yet, you can see the flashes still, and I just think that it's very, very close. But if you ask me who is more likely to make the big leagues, probably Campbell right now. But who's more likely to be a everyday regular potential all-star? It's Blyce, and so it's kind of how do you weigh those two things?
Mike, how about you? After letting Ian go off with his full
Sure.
thoughts there, your point, I think. I mean, look, you've got the consensus. Campbell entered Baseball America's top 100 in their most recent update, right as the month turned. He's at like 85 or 6 or 7 or somewhere in there. He's certainly the one with all of the helium of these guys, no question. So I think you've got a super strong argument too on why Campbell should be 4 behind the big 3.
Yeah, to me, I mean, I don't disagree with anything Ian said. I also rarely go against like we don't really usually have a big debate in the top 4 or 5. This month, I happen to feel pretty strongly that Campbell is 4, and I think it's maybe quibbling over what Ian just said. In that, I just think that I really like both players. I think they both have big upside. I agree that Blyce has bigger upside. I think that Campbell has a much higher floor, and I think that Blyce's question marks with the hit tool, anyways, are at least greater than Campbell's questions, and both have big questions and some warts. So for me, I'll go to Campbell first. Just baseball card stats: hitting 406, 504, 635 with an 1139 OPS in Portland, 115 plate appearances after kind of tearing up Greenville. And as Ian said, the peripherals look really good, and they're actually getting kind of better in Portland. And I feel like the concerns what we heard early in the season, he's posting ridiculous baseball card stats. Oh, he's just beating up on A-ball pitching. He's it's still a small sample in Portland, but he's starting to overcome that. I feel like he's made some pretty solid adjustments. A big red flag is his swing is real. You guys have said it over again. It's just funky. It's not consistent. It's weird looking. There's not a lot of players in the majors with that swing. There's not a lot of precedent for someone with that kind of approach. That worries me a little bit. I think that's a flag to keep watching. But I will keep watching it. That's something that could he gets to the majors and just doesn't work. I could totally see that happening. For Blyce, Blyce, we've always said it. Ian said it early on, earlier than anybody, that he has Ronald Acuna upside. It's ridiculous, but it's a low chance of meeting that. But there's 5 tools there. It's really impressive. Right now he's hitting 145, 211, 217. Very small sample size in Greenville. The peripheral advanced stats don't kind of portend that his peripherals are actually pretty decent down there. So I think that there's some bad luck, and so I'm not really worried about the baseball card stats, except I'm a little bit worried about his ability to hit any off-speed stuff, breaking balls, change-ups. Has not shown very well so far in Greenville. And I'm a little bit worried that could be a concern. Like Ian said, he's very young. He has some time to adjust. I'm worried that right now I have his 50th percent outcome as maybe someone that doesn't overcome that concern. Yeah. And regardless, he still has plenty of other tools to become a major league player. And if he does overcome that, he's a potential all-star. But that's the flag for me. That's just a little bit bigger than the weird swing flag for Campbell. So that's why I have Campbell at 4 and Blyce after him.
Yeah, it's funny because for me, I was looking at Campbell, and it's you want to push him up based on what he's doing, right? The instinct is to just strap the rocket to him based on the fact he gets to Double-A and gets better. That's usually a really good sign, right? As you move a guy up and he's doing better against competition. But you just see the warts we've discussed. But then when you actually look at the numbers under the hood that we talk about, your zone contact rates, your chase rates, your exit velocities, your numbers against different kinds of pitches, Campbell's probably got the best set of those in the system, especially with the way the zone contact has improved every month this season, right? He's hitting every type of pitch. He's hitting the ball extremely hard. He's not chasing at all. I mean, he's got better chase numbers than anyone ahead of him. It's right about where Anthony's are, right? He's hitting the ball as hard as anyone in that group, except for maybe Anthony is, and Anthony is just a exit velo freak, right? He's hitting off speed, he's hitting velocity, he's hitting lefties and righties. He's doing all of that. And it's just kind of like, why am I thinking of him as the one with the warts? Because, like, you know, you could say, like you said, Blaze with off speed stuff, all those guys with off speed stuff. We've talked about Marcelo Meyer against lefties this year. You know, Roman Anthony has struggled a little bit with velocity this year. You know, all those guys have things to work on, which is normal for prospects in, you know, at that level, at that age. But so it is trying to find that balance that's kind of tough. And I do wonder, you know, if Campbell had started the month ahead of Blaze, would we all have flipped, you know, would we have done the flipping? You know, how much of that is inertia good versus inertia bad? Like, show me a little bit more what you're doing. I think it's an interesting decision. I think the one thing to me is that I'm hearing the, like, it's now a big four. I don't know that I would go there. I think that's a little aggressive on Campball, even if you've got
Really-
Campbell as the
really
fourth
think that.
prospect in the system. I just
I
think there's a
agree
big
too.
gap.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I totally agree.
Yep. All right. Looking elsewhere in the rankings, because you know, we don't want to spend too long here. Some other guys that moved up. I mean, Nick York moved back up 5 spots from 17 to 12 with his, you know, solid debut in Worcester. Franklin Arias, a guy who I mentioned earlier in the FCL, moved up from 21 to 14. He's been really good in the FCL this year, especially recently. Had a really great month of June. Moving down a little bit, Alan Castro struggling a little bit. Folks who heard the last episode heard, you know, Chris Clegg's kind of eval of Castro in Greenville. He dropped from 12 to 17, so he basically swapped spots with York. Wickelby Gonzalez, who's really struggled in Double-A, you know, has been getting some different usage lately. I think mostly just trying to snap him out of whatever funk he's in. Drops from 15 to 20. He's been going, you know, 3 innings, pitching out of the bullpen as they just try and get him right. So some different movement in that top 20. And then you get some bigger jumps lower down. You know, Stinks and Garcia moving up 33 to 23. Hayden Mullins and Cutter Coffee in Greenville both had nice little jumps. Bailey Horn, who was great out of the bullpen in New York, moves up from 49 to 32 as he makes his major league debut and is contributing at the major league level. So some big movement, I guess. And then there's some guys kind of outside the top 40 we'll definitely make sure we talk about. But inside that top 40 for jumps, anyone, Ian, that you wanted to highlight in terms of guys who moved a fair amount?
Yeah, sure. I think Arias probably deserves the most buzz here because he's someone, just talking to scouts who've seen the FCL, that there are guys who think he's right there with Cespedes. I'm not there yet. Because it's, and the way it was described to me is like, it's kind of like you got to pick your lane. Cespedes, you're talking about the high upside offensive player who has a, picture perfect swing, crazy bat speed, approach is a little rough, defense is a little rough. Arias is kind of more polished. There's not as much upside there, but he's got a good swing, makes a ton of contact, solid enough defender, can still play shortstop for now. So that it's kind of like a pick your lane thing there. But he was someone that just, when I was putting my list together and reaching out to people, everyone kept saying, nope, push him up. And then he eventually kind of ended up where he did in the top 15. So yeah, he was someone that he has a lot of fans around the game. And he ended up higher by the end of the process than he did at the beginning for me.
He does seem like he does fit in that group of position players that we have in that sort of 11 to 19 range. That's York, Lugo, Paulino, Castro, Yohan Fran Garcia, Blaze Jordan.
I mean, I'd extend it to 9. I think that right now it's like the top 7, and then it's like 8 to whatever you can. Flip it around.
Zanatello at 10 is the next hitter above that. Nydroth at 11.
Or sorry, I have him at 9, but yeah, like I just think that after Cespedes, I think that Fitz is kind of like dropped down to that level, to this next tier, and then it's just like, who knows?
100%.
You could really, I wouldn't blame anyone for anything from 8 to 25 in like any order. 24 probably. I don't think I put Monegro in there, but yeah, like 8 to mid 20s is you could really justify in any order.
100%. Mike, who in the top 40 did you want to maybe highlight in terms of their movement in the rankings?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, worth noting, because there's been a little bit of, gripes on social media or on our forum around Nick York, who had previously been in our top 5,
Yeah.
and we have him at 12 now.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's some reasons for that. And I think one of the gripes was that, hey, this guy used to be a top 5 player. He's having his best season ever. And I just don't think the facts were right there. He struggled for 550 plate appearances.
He had 700 in AA.
AA, right. And he never really put it together in 700 plate appearances in AA. And we all talked about this. You guys have talked about on the pod. I think he just got a kick upstairs to AAA to like try to kind of rattle him and light a fire. And it has. And he's been excellent, but it's been, I don't know, 25 games in AAA, and he's been excellent. And maybe this is the real Nick York, but for a couple seasons, he wasn't there. And the hit tool is what's got to carry him. And his hit tool wasn't there because his defense is somewhat marginal. The power's not probably what's going to carry him. You really need that hit tool to carry him, and it wasn't there for a while. And now that it's back, it's been fantastic. And if he keeps this up for a couple months, I will keep a watch on that and give him another boost. But it's just kind of 25 games. Players can have a good 25 game stretch, but I'm impressed with what he's done there so far.
Yeah, it was, I don't think, we don't like yo-yoing guys. We always talk about, right, where just because they're struggling, you don't want to yo-yo them too far down or up, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they're playing well. I think the drop to 17 was completely warranted, like for the reasons you just said, Mike.
I think disagree, but I mean, I think he is who he is. I didn't change him. I had him 12 last month. I have him 12 this month. I think that, like, this is what Mike said about how,
I regret yo-yoing a bit.
I just think he was static, and he was static in Portland because it didn't look that interested, honestly. And I think it can definitely be disheartening, if, especially you look back at spring training, if you remember, he was like with the big league team, then he gets sent down, obviously gets optioned, but he had to have assumed he was going to go to AAA to start the season. And then to not do that, that's got to be disappointing. And I think that, those struggles might have carried over to the field. Just watching him play, there were just some at bats where it just looks like they were just giveaways. Some swings that were just made no sense, like, change ups where he just didn't even seem like he really was that interested in swinging at them until the last possible second, which is very strange. And that's why, like, I still thought the raw ability was there. And I think that, as Mike said, getting that promotion to AAA has kind of woken him up. And especially when you're in AAA, that's where you start to interact with the guys like the Jamie Westberg types, the guys who are, the career minor leaguers, or the guys now in Westberg's case that, have got a shot at the big leagues. And I do think that can be a motivating factor for someone like York. It's like, oh wait, do I want to be someone who, ends up here for the next 5 years? Do I want to take that next step and see how these professionals act, see how these guys are in the weight room every day, putting that extra work in, which is something York has admitted that he wasn't very good at, especially early in his career. And I think that's kind of woken him up. And as the hit tool is going to have to carry him, which is why he's not in the top 10. And I don't know if it's going to be probably hard for him to crack the top 8 or so for me.
Right.
Because the ceiling is just capped because of who he is. Like, the defense is fringy. I'm not sure how much the power is going to actualize at the major league level. But as Mike said, if he can get back to being like above average hit tool, there's a path to a big leaguer still, which is why I think he's the type of guy you just have to keep alive, and you keep, in that range for those reasons.
Yeah, to Chris's point about the yo-yoing, I feel like, to me, it's more about, like, I could see him approaching the 8-9 range out of the 12. I don't want to yo-yo him there now, because what if he spends all of July or all of August going back to what he did in Portland for?
Oh yeah.
And if that happens, then he's around the right place.
Yeah, all the guys, and we've talked about it over and over again. I think that all the guys after like 8-9, they have a pretty substantial issue. And like, you look at Matthew Lugo, and he's been very inconsistent. I do wonder how much the injury, the hand injury, is impacting him. But like, he gets up to Worcester, struggles, but he's and he's got good pull power, but he's a left fielder. Like, the bar is really high there. Chase Mydroth gets on base a million times, but there's no impact there. And at the big league level,
impact meaning like like hitting the ball hard
Yeah,
with
yes.
authority, not
Yeah.
like an impact player.
No. But like, is he going to get up to the big leagues and teams are just going to give him the Nick Madrigal treatment where it's like, here's 98
Exactly.
up in the zone. Like, what are you going to do? You're not going to make us pay, so we don't care. Even like Zanatello is someone who he's having a ton
Strikeout
of trouble making contact right now. Like all these guys have issues. And so that's why, as you said, it's like, it's kind of like which of these are the least concerning is how it has to be ranking, and why it's just hard to push them that much higher. They're kind of stuck in this range, as you said, Mike.
You know, you mentioned Zanatello. He's a guy that I kind of struggled with because I do think I had him last month, maybe a cut above that group. And now, even though his ranking didn't move much, I think he is now back into that group. Not that he was like levels above that group, but I think with the struggles he had, I talked to someone who saw him a lot in high school and then went back in and was looking at his swings now. I was like, what happened to the explosiveness? Like the explosiveness in his swing is gone. And that was concerning to me. You look at the K rate since he came back from the injured list, which I wonder how much of that is just the usage pattern they've had with him is very weird. I've talked about, he was DHing like 3 times a week. I don't know if he's played more than 2 games in a row. He might have played 3 at this point, but like if he did, that's very recent. Like they have been easing him back in because of these numerous hamstring injuries. I wonder how much the usage is just like he's not really getting on track. I don't know. But
he played 3 in a row the first 3 days of July.
Okay, yeah. So he's just recently getting back into that.
And that was the first time looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, you wonder about that. There's a number of guys struggling in that lineup, which is interesting.
So this is, I actually just thought of this. If you had to pick one person from this range who has a chance to push the top 7, who would it be? Because I have a name in mind, and I have a feeling we're all going to end up with the same name.
You're talking hitters only?
No.
Okay.
Because mine is definitely not a hitter.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly why I asked. I mean, I'm going with Elmer Rodriguez.
Oh, really? Because that's not who I had at all.
Well, what's the range you're talking? In the actual ranking,
it could be 8 to 8 to 25 is what I'm thinking. I think it would be very difficult for someone outside the top 20, honestly, to move in. But I'll push it to 25.
Okay, Mike.
I'll go for Arias.
What?
I'll go Arias.
That's a good one. And we're gonna have all different ones. See, that's why I wanted to do this. So I had David Sandlin because I think that there's a non-zero chance he might be because I mean Clegg saw him. Really thinking of him. Yeah, Clegg saw him, and like I talked to a scout who saw him, and it's like if he's healthy, the stuff is better than anyone not named Paralis in the system. So he's gotten back, and it's hard to evaluate him right now because he's still throwing like 3 inning stints. Because they're obviously being very careful.
He didn't get a rehab from he just went back to pitching in Greenville in shorter outings.
So, where's his fastball? Where's his fastball topping out in last month?
99.
Yep, sweet.
So like you look at since he came back from the DL, his first start was like it was like 1 2/3 innings, 3 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 strikeouts, no walks. But in the next 3 outings, he's 8 innings, 16 strikeouts, 2 walks, 5 hits allowed. So, and like it's premium stuff. Like, you know, we're talking high 90s fastball, good secondaries. It's just, and this has always been, I think, kind of the concern with him. Can he actually start, or is he more like a relief multi-inning type? Because there is effort, and obviously he's not stayed healthy in his career. Like he missed the end of last season with an injury. He's missed a decent amount of this season with an injury. So I think that he's someone who bears watching, because like when you talk about like him versus Fitz, for example, Sandlin has considerably more upside, and it's definitely something I'm monitoring. Is like he to me is the one guy who I could foresee, you know, jumping into that top 7-8 group. Especially if he continues to show how he has recently.
Yeah, for sure. Outside of the top 40, just some guys to highlight. We mentioned Noah Dean. He jumps back into the rankings at number 46. Strong June has really improved as the year's gone on. He's ready for a bump up to Greenville. Shane Drohan was, I don't even know if he came back last episode, right, Ian? We talked about him. He was returned from Chicago. He re-enters the rankings at 47, which for me was a real dart throw. I mean,
who knows?
Who knows what he is? He's in Fort Myers.
His pitch data from Chicago is meh, but it's like
it was 10 innings, right? Like it was yeah. But we have 4 other debuts that we just updated all 4 of their scouting reports last night at 12:30 in the morning. Debut. No, you got them done. I got back from dinner. That's not you. That's me. Juan Valera enters the rankings at 42 in the FCL rotation. Debuting at 43 is Dalvinson Reyes, who's now the top ranked DSL player in the system. He was a signee this year. He's been the top pitcher down there. And then further down, debuting at 54 is another FCL pitcher, Jefferson Vargas. And at 55 is now the top ranked DSL hitter in first baseman / outfielder, Justin Gonzalez, who's a big boy. So maybe we can do this a minute or two on each of those, especially because you just got in and updated those scouting reports and tell people who they all are.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll just move down the list. Juan Valera has been probably, with Ovis Portes promotion, he's been probably the most impressive arm in the FCL so far this season. He is an 18-year-old. He signed out of the Dominican Republic for $45,000 2 years ago. So he went on, the normal progression from DSL. Once again, we talk about like DSL numbers. Who knows? Guy had a 6 ERA in the DSL last year. Like, this year in the FCL, 31 innings. He's given up 17 hits. He's got 27 strikeouts, 14 walks, 2.3 ERA. Whip is under 1, and he's raw, but he's got, fastball 93 to 97, slider 83 to 85. Slider is scouts like the pitch a lot. He's done a really good job. He's got good shape with it, and he does a good job kind of manipulating it. He can add, subtract, add a little more tilt, things like that. Third pitch doesn't really exist, so that's definitely a work in progress. Kind of seems more bullpenny because of that. He's also not as projectable, and this is what separates like Portes above these guys. Is Portes is like 6'4", 170. It's the frame you look for in a pitcher. Valera is kind of more compact. He's like 6'3", 205 right now. So there's not as much projection, but he's good athletically, or he's very athletic. And there's just, there's some interesting pitch stuff going on there. So he's an interesting guy. The next one you mentioned was, I'll just stay in the FCL, was Jefferson Vargas. Vargas is just a pure arm strength play. He's a little older. He's 19. Because I think he signed late, but it was a $10,000 signing, but he's up to 98. Mid 90s fastball, sliders, work in progress. Another guy who looks bullpenny, especially because he's kind of like that more compact frame, 6'1", 215. But he's got a really big arm, and that's kind of, when you're at the FCL, that's what you're looking for with those guys. Jumping down to the DSL, as you said, Dalvinson Reyes was their big money pitcher last year. I think he signed for $450,000.
Yeah, he was their top pitcher signing in terms of bonus.
He is it's just super projection. That's what you're banking on. He's 6'5", like great frame, lot of room to fill out, good delivery, arm action works, fastball, it's like 88 to 92, sinker type, kind of like a power sinker. Tops out of 93, velo's trending in the right direction, and you're just basically betting that the velo is going to continue to increase. And then he's got good feel for 2 secondaries already. Like, he is 17, but he's showing pretty good feel for a slider and a changeup. Changeup has some nice fade. Slider throws it a little more, but he's throwing both those pitches like 15% plus of the time. And when you compare that to the guys I just mentioned with Valera and Vargas, who literally throw their third pitch like 1% of the time, he's really interesting. And he's someone who there's like, when you're looking at starting pitching prospects in the low minors, he's the guy to keep an eye on, because if things continue on the trend he's someone I could quickly see in the top 30, especially as he makes the jump stateside next year. And then the final guy you mentioned was Justin Gonzalez. He's probably,
big boy,
probably a different discussion, but their international class from last year offensively is looking a little rough right now. A lot of those guys are struggling.
And we heard in camp that might be the case.
Yeah. But like, you look at even like their top guys are hitting like near the bottom of the order and not hitting at all. The guys who got the biggest bonuses, that is. Gonzalez is kind of the outlier there. I was actually looking because the DSL teams played each other yesterday. He's the only guy with an OPS, I think, over 800 in the lineup.
Yeah, they did sit a couple of the key guys though.
Okay.
Anderson Fermin sticks out to me in the top of my head as the guy who's been starting in center field for DSL Red.
Got it. I didn't know who was sitting, but
they sat a couple of the key guys down there yesterday in the scrimmage, which they do sometimes.
So he's 17, but
you're not wrong.
he's Gonzalez is 17, but he's like 6'4", 6'5", 220 already.
Mhm.
So it's like filled out. Right guy too, which is a little tough, but I mean he's 321, 404, 551. The juice in the bat is legit. Like this is a big time power prospect. And the thing that is interesting is he's not really sacrificing on the contact side. Like it's an aggressive approach, but he makes contact consistently on pitches in the zone. He doesn't chase very much. And his EVs for 19-year-old, or excuse me, for 17-year-old are really impressive. Like, I mean, he's putting up better exit velos, for example, than you compare him to like someone like Edinson Paulinho, Mikey Romero, Cutter Coffee.
Nick way above Nick Sogard.
Yeah, well, Nick Sogard's a different animal, but
Well, but I know, but I'm just saying Sogard's
yeah.
a guy in AAA who's 26. Like,
yeah, like this is a guy with serious juice in the bat. I mean, it's better than Cespedes so far this year, just EV wise, or
Yeah.
right on par. I guess
right with him. Yep.
So he's just an interesting bat. It's the ceiling's probably going to be capped because of the defensive limitations and the right profile, but there's some. It's an interesting bat to follow with unique size and power potential.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you for that rundown. And Mike, I know we only have you for a little bit longer before you turn into a pumpkin, but anyone you wanted to highlight in that lower third of the list in terms of rankings or otherwise?
I don't think so. I think Ian covered what I wanted to cover. It struck me that when we're ranking DSL prospects, it's such a crapshoot for it is 17, not even 17 and a half yet. We're ranking them basically high school players against professional baseball players. It's such a throw of the dart. Like this guy's the same age as my daughter, who's a rising junior in high school. Like, I mean, how are you supposed to rank that against people that have been playing professional baseball for a few years, or like who's in the majors already? It's just it's fun, it's crazy, it's interesting. It makes things interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Ian mentioned Valera's numbers last year. Vargas last year is an 18-year-old in the DSL, had an ERA above 6, walked 24 guys in 34 innings, had a WHIP of 1.91. I mean, he's a guy we easily could have projected as a potential cut. I mean, like just based on those numbers, just because you just don't know, right? He signed for 10 grand. So it's interesting to see who of these guys does pop. And that's why, like, when people freak out if they didn't sign anyone to a $4 million bonus, it's like, well, sometimes the $10,000 bonus guy winds up developing to throw mid-90s and becomes something of a guy. So don't freak out until we're 3 years down the road and whether there's no one coming out of this class.
It's also why I think we've tended to be kind of more conservative with the DSL guys. Like, just because a guy signed for $1 million plus doesn't mean that he immediately is going to go into the top 30 for us. And I think it just comes down to, like, there's just so much volatility with these prospects that I'd rather wait, start someone lower and see what, get reports, get some data before we kind of make that jump and push those guys up. Cause I don't want to just put a guy, high up on the list because of pedigree like that.
Yeah, I mean, Vlad Asensio,
the guy that got the $1 million, he's been awful this year, but his awful baseball card stats and the peripherals aren't great. We don't have much in terms of scouting reports, but he could come back next year and be in the FCL and be the next guy that, turns it around and actually puts up numbers and looks good in the field. So we just don't he's not in the top 60 anymore, but he's on the fringe of it. We're not burying him. We're not it's just not enough information to make great decisions.
100%. 100%. I like it. Cool.
Could I just, there were two guys I wanted to briefly mention that I think kind of like glossed over a little bit. Number one is Josh Nixon Garcia, and because he homered again last night.
Yeah.
He is an interesting one because he hits the snot out of the ball. But the reason, and this is the why, even though he's in Greenville, he's hitting 321, 383, 679 with 11 home runs in 28 games. Like, he's destroying the baseball.
Yeah.
Caveat being Greenville in the summer is a great place to hit.
Yep.
But like his exit velos and everything are really legit. What limits him for me and why I'm not higher on him yet is I just have concerns about the hit tool. There's some real red flags there under the surface with him. And as much as I think the power is legit, like, it's probably 60 plus raw, I'm just not sure he's going to be able to get to it against better pitching because of the hit tool, which is why I'm still being a little cautious with him, like outside the top 20. But again, like, as we talked about with the way this list is, I could see, a case for putting him inside the top 20 if you buy the hit tool more than I do. I'm just not there yet with what I've been seeing and hearing with him. I don't know where you guys are on him.
Let me just jump in real quick. His zone contact, while still not great, did improve in June. So it's trending right, at least. I don't, not to poo-poo your concerns. I think that's 100% legitimate. But, as a guy who has, like we mentioned, Campbell, Garcia has had that same kind of upward trajectory on those numbers. So as long as they continue to improve, it'll be okay, hopefully. But those are what to watch for him, for sure.
For me, I just think it's awesome that his nickname is the password.
Yeah.
If you're a listener and not a reader and haven't seen how his name is spelled out, it's just a jumble of a bunch of letters that don't usually go together. And somebody named him the password a couple years ago, and he ended up putting it in his Twitter bio, and he kind of digs it. So I think that's kind of cool.
One of the best nicknames in the system in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. So Mike, you're not used to seeing a T, a Y, an N, and an X next to each other?
Right. And I'm a Polish guy too.
And then the other one I wanted to mention was someone Chris briefly mentioned earlier was Bailey Horn. His stuff is nasty. I just don't know if he's ever going to throw enough strikes, but he is throwing strikes right now. And so that's to me why he got pushed up. Like the breaking ball, it has ridiculous traits. The fastball's got some juice. Like they've kind of got him throwing enough strikes. Like it's not great, but it's like it's reached a point where it's manageable. But he can miss a ton of bats, and that's from the left side. Like the bar for lefty relievers is so low that that was kind of what pushed him up for me, especially like I know he's a little bit on the older side, but I feel like we're going to be running into more cases like this where guys just go from orgs that might not necessarily be the best at developing pitching. And a team sees something that they like, they bring him in and they're able to unlock something. And I do wonder if he might be a case of like a late bloomer because of that. Just kind of yo-yoing between the White Sox and the Cubs for a few years didn't do him a lot. And brought him over here, and with Andrew Bailey, Andrew Bailey, Justin Willard and co, they've been able to unlock something. But he's someone pretty interesting to watch. Especially, with that it's the first time in his career he's throwing strikes in even like usable level.
Well, look
at the game on Friday.
I was just about to say this.
I was watching my father-in-law, and he was like, "Who the hell is this guy?" It reminded me a little bit. Oh man, I'm losing it now. Pass on that, but basically just came out ballsy, pitched a really nice inning in a high leverage situation in the Yankees on Friday, and
Marcus Walden,
their biggest win of the year so far, I think.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say
thinking of Brazier. I was thinking of Brazier when he kind of was barking at somebody in the Yankees and was like, "Get back in the batter's box."
Yeah. Well, I was going to say in that game you got 4 2/3 out of Horn and Cam Boozer. That were huge and a big win. And those are two examples of that kind of guy.
And I think it's interesting that what he was doing at AAA, they've like obviously extremed it out. Like so far in his 3 big league outings, he's throwing 62% sweepers. He's like the reverse Isaiah Campbell. Yeah. But if you look at like his breaking ball value is all like he's not qualified in anything yet, but like there's legit breaking ball value there. And he's running a high ground ball rate, walk rate's okay. He's not giving up solid contact, low EVs. So he's someone interesting. And I don't know if there's a ton of upside, but if we're talking about a guy who can be a lefty reliever close to big league ready already, that's a fringy right around the 30th ranked prospect in the system right now. So that's why he made that huge jump, I think, for me.
All right, Mike, I think we're losing you. Yeah.
I gotta go.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for joining us, sir. We'll get you back on the pod soon. All right. Well, let's move on to emails. Again, if you want to shoot us an email, hit us up at podcast@soxprospects.com. Ian, our first email is from Jordan, who says, "Hello. I noticed that Christian Campbell starts in a closed stance and after his step comes open a bit. However, that seems to be a little inconsistent, where sometimes he's stepping to a point where his feet are even and sometimes he's stepping to where he's open at like a 45-degree angle. Any thoughts on this? New to scouting, so wondering if this is something that could make him susceptible to off speed. Is there any data that could answer that? Or is it just a quote, some things work for some hitters, end quote, and maybe it's just a unique thing? Funky swing nonetheless, and curious to hear what you think. Keep up the great work and really enjoy the podcast." Thanks for the email, Jordan. I mean, this is kind of what we've been talking about, Ian, right? With Campbell and his swing.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are definitely concerns that
it's weird.
It's a weird swing, and I'm just watching it right now. And yeah, I mean, he starts very close. He, really coils up and then takes a big step towards left field. like
Mhm.
ends open. And it's just, you don't see a lot of guys doing that. And often when they're doing that, like kind of like the foot in the bucket, it's they're flying open to try and pull the ball. But he's an all fields guy. Like, so it's very unique. And yeah, it's not something I would ever teach. um,
Yeah.
but I mean, as he said, it works for him. So we'll kind of wait and see. And that's, he's going to have these questions all the way up because of
Yep.
this. But if
Yep.
he can make it work for him, then more power to him. And the Red Sox have got to steal.
Exactly. All right. Our next email comes to us from the Cable News Network maven himself, John Berman, he actually has a couple of questions, Ian. He says, one, if the Sox are in buy mode, what return could prospects on the 40-man bubble for next year truly yield? How much can you actually get for combinations of Nick York, Edinson Paulino, Chase Mydroth, Blaze Jordan, Matthew Lugo, et cetera, et cetera? And as many have pointed out, Ian, the Red Sox do kind of have, I don't know that I'd go log jam, but they've got a lot of guys who are Rule 5 eligible next year that they, in theory, need to add to the 40-man roster this offseason. Although I thought my Droth actually doesn't need to get added until December of 2025. So maybe carve him out of there because he's not as immediate a concern. But, there are guys that he just mentioned. That's not even to mention the pitchers, but you've got Blaze Jordan, you've got Nick York, you've got Matthew Lugo, you've got Edinson Paulino. I don't know how many of those guys they're even going to add, but it's also just kind of like that seems like a pool you could trade from. Can you get
Yeah.
the fifth starter? I don't know.
I think you easily could. I mean, I just look back and I think a pretty good kind of example of something like this was the Red Sox and the Christian Vasquez trade. Like William Abreu and Emmanuel Valdez were kind of in similar positions as guys who needed to be added to the 40 man and were ranked, 10, 8 to 20 in a system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we put them both in the teens, I think, after they arrived.
Yeah. So
in a worse
system. Yeah. So it's like, I think you could definitely get, like, if they need a reliever, you're not going to be shopping in the high end of the market, but you could get, solid depth pieces with those guys pretty comfortably, I think.
Yep. His second question is if we're in sell mode, and by the way, his email is titled Pick a Lane. He says, but if they're in sell mode, what level of prospect do you expect to get back for Kenley Jansen or Tyler O'Neill or Nick Pivetta? For hypothetical purposes, what would be their Sox prospect return so we understand the value? I mean, I think that's kind of what you're looking at, like with the Vasquez trade, right? It's that kind of guy.
No, I think
it depends, I guess.
Well, no, I think Pivetta. If Pivetta throw Pivetta, it's going to be dependent on how strong. Like if he pitched like he did in his last start, you're getting way more than that. I think Kenley, you would get more than that just because he's been excellent, frankly, lately. And if a team needs a closer, I mean, we've seen closers go for way more, especially if this year looks weird because there's a lot of teams in contention in both leagues, and it seems like it's going to be a massive sellers market where there are not that many teams who are true sellers. And so if you do, you probably can demand a premium. So I think they could get a pretty good haul for those guys. So, you're probably talking like maybe a fringe top 10 talent, someone who fits in that 8 to 25 range or several guys in that range. I just don't think with how they're playing right now, you can sell. Like, it just would send such a bad message.
To be fair to John,
John, as an ex-player is.
Yeah. John sent this email on June 27th. So to be fair to him,
understandable. Yeah.
They've gotten hot since then.
But yeah, I think with the way they're going, I don't think you make any all-in moves unless it's something that and an all-in move is I'm thinking of like a rental, but I could see them making a pretty sizable move if it brings back someone under team control for a few years.
Sure.
But other than that, I think you're probably looking more. You kind of like go out and get some, like you get like a fifth starter type, like a Michael Lorenzen type. I don't think the Rangers are going to sell, which was why a lot of people want Eovaldi back. I just don't. Serious last year, they're not going to sell. Like they're getting their entire rotation back. I just don't see them at this point. I mean, I guess things can change over the next 3 weeks, but I just have a hard time believing they would sell. But go get someone like a Michael Lorenzen type, or like, who can be a fourth starter, who can give you innings. Cause that's the area I think that they need the most help in is that rotation. I think
as long as they're go ahead.
The lineup when you get Costasbach, especially with Yoshida hitting, is going to be fine. Maybe you can get a right-handed bat, preferably a second baseman, but maybe they're still counting on Grissom to do that too. But I look at the rotation as the concern to me because Houck has struggled lately, and something I talked about on the last episode that he's going to be like eclipsing his career high in innings probably in his next start. there's some interest. Like, that's what are they going to do with
How do you
him?
handle that? Yeah.
I was talking about this with someone that I think there's a non-zero
Barrett?
chance. No.
Oh, okay.
Someone
Mhm.
that they get creative with his pitching schedule, and he maybe only makes like one start over the next 3 weeks, something along those lines. Because you can do it
Mhm.
with the schedule. It
Well,
wouldn't
and
be
the
the
other
worst thing,
thing,
honestly, if he skipped the All-Star game. I'll throw that out there. I
yeah,
doubt he does that, but
or if he pitches in the All-Star game and you use that as an excuse to, like, I mean, they've got a day off. They play today. They've got a day off tomorrow. They've got 6 games before the All-Star break.
I would skip him, honest. I would I would. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, it depends. They know better than I.
it's also
I
tough when you're in contention to skip your best starter.
I know,
Like,
but like, if you're going to be in contention, you need Tanner Houck in August and September, and I'm just worried that he can't jump from 112 innings or whatever it was last year to like 190 this year.
yeah,
That just you just like, I mean, maybe he can. Maybe they'll just say screw it. Like, he's he's 28. I think he's
use the
28. Like,
bullets.
yeah. But I just find that hard to believe that they would allow that jump. So you're going to have to start cutting some innings somewhere. And the way to do that to me would be like skip a start now, pitch him in the 6th game back out of the break. Like, if you do that, you basically can get almost 3 weeks off. And so
And
that's something to think about with him. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I commented on Twitter about how, like, Cooper Criswell lines up with Josh Winkowski's rotation spot right now, Ian. I almost wonder, do you go 6-man for a little bit, which I don't want to do, because it's like, it's tough having one of Winkowski and Criswell as your regularly in your rotation. Like, I'm fine with them as spot starters, but like having both, maybe if you can line them up against better matchups, but like,
well, the
is that
concern
what you
there, though,
gotta do
is the
there?
bullpen. Like,
Yeah,
I
that
think
puts
when
more
you-
strain on the bullpen.
yeah, because especially with Chris Martin out, and this is another thing. If
Yeah.
Martin's going to be out, you probably need another leverage righty.
Mhm.
Like, those guys are gas. Like Weissert, like Bernardino, Kelly, even
Slayton, you're asking a lot out of.
Slayton.
He's your setup man right now as a rookie. Like,
Yeah, like those, and the way it is now, like, you can't use Slayton really in a multi-inning role because he's your setup guy.
you might need him
and you
back to
need him.
backs. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, but if Slayton's not available, like, I think Zach Kelly's been excellent this year. I'm not sure I'm ready to trust him as like an 8th inning guy yet.
Nope.
Weissert can't pitch with guys on base for whatever reason. It's very strange, but like the bullpen without Martin is rougher. Ironically, do you know they really could use someone like Ryan Fernandez, who is the Cardinals' like 8th inning reliever now and has been disgusting this season.
And this
But
is
that's
the
a
other
different-
thing too. None of those AAA arms has really popped in
No.
AAA. They've been fine, but like,
But I think that's why you see them go get Alex Spies, who we didn't really mention, but
Yeah.
who knows? Like, he just pitched for the first time since he joined the org yesterday.
Wingenter, Wingenter.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you go get those guys.
Rosenberger.
I think they're trying to find another more depth options there, because you look at the pictures on the 40 beyond them. Campbell's been terrible when he's been up in the big leagues lately. Uwasawa's whatever.
I think
Keller's whatever.
It wouldn't surprise me if Uwasawa or Keller is the guy that gets DFA'd for Wingenter, honestly.
But yeah, like, they don't have a lot of MLB ready right-handed relievers now that Kelly is up in the big leagues. He was kind of the guy they had down there as the depth option.
That's why they have 3 lefties right now.
Yeah, and you
granted,
look
part
at
of that's the Yankees, but
you look at the prospects, like Zephyr John struggled. Guerrero's been up and down. Like, there's no one ready for that right-handed relief role. So I think that's another area you could see them go to look to address.
100%. All right, our next email is from Andrew. And by the way, thanks for the email, Andrew. Just an FYI for folks who email us. If you email, don't reply in the same thread, just because of how I keep track of our incoming emails. So I'd rather you send a fresh email with like a new subject line and everything. But normally that's not how I would do it. But just FYI for everyone who wants to send us an email. I think this is an interesting question, Ian. Andrew asks, essentially, how you would compare Nick York with Emmanuel Valdez. How would you compare their various tools? I know it's difficult to compare someone who's had time in the majors with someone who hasn't, but not sure if it's slightly easier considering they've both spent time in Worcester this year. It's an interesting thought as kind of like maybe hit tool first, second baseman types who struggle a little bit on defense. I do think there are differences though, but I thought it was an interesting question.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I think Valdez has substantially more power is the first thing I would say. I think that York probably gets a slight edge in hit tool, but
Doesn't quite have the
Valdez,
platoon concern
yeah,
that Valdez does.
Valdez probably hits lefties though better than York hits either side, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or sorry, hits righties. Excuse me. He
But
can't
I
hit
was gonna say,
lefties. Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I think profile wise, like they probably could end up in a similar bucket because of the defensive concerns, platoon concerns for Valdez, but more impact against righties, whereas York probably could be a little more consistent against both sides of the plate, but there's not as much impact or power potential. So yeah, I think they kind of probably could fall both similar to like 40 in that fringy 40 to 45 range.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they're close. I think it's an interesting thought. Can we double back to the right-handed reliever thing real quick? Because one name I just realized we didn't mention.
Sure,
That I
Brian
think
Mata.
it would be ideal if he turns into that guy, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he's there yet, but he's been injured so much this year. I think that's the ideal outcome with Mata is he turns into that guy.
Well, and so they have to
how are they
decide
going to
by
use
what
him?
they have to decide by the 15th, right?
Essentially the All-Star break. Yeah. They have to they have until the All-Star break to figure out, like they hit till he has to come up. I wonder, that's when his rehab has to end. They don't necessarily need to call him up and immediately DFA someone on that date. It's just that's when his rehab assignment ends. And I think they have a little bit of wiggle room, especially going into the break. They might not have to do anything till after the break.
So when do they? Okay, got it. Okay, that's what I was
Because the
when do
15th
they-
is the first day of the break, but I don't think if they're not playing, I don't think they necessarily need to activate him quite yet. I think.
Yeah, because he threw yesterday, and I'm just trying to bring up his data to see what it looks like because I'm curious now.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where yesterday was the first time they used him out in a bullpen role, which I get the stretching him out thing. I get trying to get him as many reps as possible, but if you're going to use him in that bullpen role, he's basically got this coming week of 6 games to evaluate him. I'd love to see him he's going to at least throw once more. I'd love if they could get 2 more out of him, but we'll see.
Yeah, so he was 94 to 98.
I mean, they probably
fastball.
send one of the lefties down in Horn or Boozer just to give him a look. I can't see them DFAing him.
I mean, we'll see. It probably depends on how these next couple outings go. But yeah, stuff looks, I mean, fine. Like slider, yeah. I mean, the stuff looks about what we expect. High 80 slider, curveball. Doesn't look like he's throwing a changeup right now.
Yeah.
Except there's some sinkers in here that could have been the changeup. Honestly, that's actually. I'm wondering if this is wrong. But yeah. I mean, we'll see. The velo is there though, at least. But it's going to be about strikes and then staying healthy with him.
Yeah. Our next email is from Jason, who says, I have a question about how minor leaguers use scouting reports. I was thinking about how Meyer has struggled with spin for a few years now, and if he were to be called up to the bigs, he would see a heavy diet of breaking balls. However, this hasn't really happened in the minors. I assume it's because pitchers are working on their own development and not necessarily trying to get the best results. Is there a point where this shifts? In my mind, an up and down reliever might be more focused on executing a game plan than a 22-year-old developing in Double-A would. Curious your guys' thoughts and how this would factor into a prospect's development. Thanks. Great question, Jason. And to me, I almost wonder, Ian, how much this is changing now with this changed focus on how prospect development works. I can remember when we were really starting to see shifts, for example, right? How like every team had every player's spray chart and you would see guys getting shifted in low A ball. Right. Like I remember when we were talking about seeing like Josh Ockamy getting shifted in A ball, but then it was like, oh, half the lineup is getting shifted. So there definitely are scouting reports, but certainly not to the degree you have in the major leagues with like advanced scouting just for the purpose of providing a how to attack this guy scouting report. I wonder, and I don't know if you're seeing anything that tells you one way or another, whether we're almost trending away from using a player's scouting report and more towards like the email says, focusing on a player's individual development, developing pitches, developing how to attack hitters generally, as opposed to this guy in front of me, what he's not good at.
He sees a ton of breaking balls, honestly.
He does. And
So
I remember when
think
Miguel
it's-
Blaze got to low A, he immediately saw a bunch of breaking balls too. So maybe
Yeah,
I think
no,
with
I think
top
they
guys,
do-
maybe more than other guys, we see that.
I think they do use it because, like, you see it. They have iPads in the dugout, like they do in the majors. Like it's the same. They have the same access to technology, and I think that there's a blend of execution because you do need to throw all your pitches, but at the same time, you're still trying to get outs, and so I do think that top guys still see like pitches that they struggle with. That's something that there's still an emphasis on. So he does see a lot of breaking balls, especially more comparatively than I would say compared to like Anthony. He sees more breaking balls. I would be curious what the actual numbers are. I can probably find out.
Mhm.
But just from my eye test of seeing, that Portland for 10 games or whatever I have this year, I would say that Meyer sees a substantially more breaking balls than Teal and Anthony have. Not substantially more, but more than Anthony and Teal have so far this season. So
Mhm.
I do think that teams do that, because at the same time as you're saying, you got to work on yourself. You do need to go out there and be able to show that you can execute a game plan, and that is part of development, is being able to execute a game plan. And so it's not like they're just going to go in and be like, hey, in the low minors, maybe it's like this, but I think when you get up to Double A and above, you have to be able to execute against specific batters in specific situations.
Yep.
And that's that you kind of go in knowing what you're going to be throwing to those guys.
Yep, makes sense. We get two more, Ian. First, is an email from Tyler who asks, he says it may be irrelevant by the time the next podcast comes around because he emailed this before Brian Bayo's last start. But he says, does Brian Bayo still have options after signing his extension? The team probably wouldn't want that money sitting in AAA, but it may not be a bad thing for him to get some time to work on things. Or would a Phantom IL stint be a better option? Tyler's certainly not the only person. I saw a lot of people talking about whether Bayo should get optioned. In a literal rules, like how things work based sense, Bayo still has two options. And he does not have, I think he definitely doesn't have 5 years of service time. So he can be optioned without having to consent to it, like Keller did. That said, Ian, I think functionally I can't see optioning Brian Bayo, even if unless he's just completely broken. I just can't see it happening.
They don't have anyone to replace him. Like, I don't know, unless you want to have both Criswell and Winkowski in the rotation. I just don't think it makes sense to do something like that.
Yeah, I just think the fact, like getting, like, look what they did, where you can do things like get him a couple of extra days and work with him, get him an extra side or an extra bullpen or something. I think that's what you do. I can't see optioning him, especially like you said with that roster concern. And our final emails from John B. He says, "Hey guys, what's your take on Mickey Gasper's defense behind the plate? Reese McGuire has not been good this year, and the Red Sox could probably use another right-handed hitter or switch hitter on the bench." I'll throw to you for Gasper real quick in a minute, Ian. But the thing I wanted to mention with McGuire, like, since Wong has really broken out, becoming the key player he is for this lineup, McGuire is just not playing enough that I'm worried about what he's bringing into the plate offensively. If a guy's playing every fourth game, he's just not going to get on track. So I'm just not worried about replacing Reese McGuire right now. That's not something I'm thinking of doing. But that said, Mickey Gasper is an interesting guy in that, like I said, he hit cleanup the other day in Worcester. He's been hitting, he's may become a regular in that lineup. Granted, they've got, 12 healthy position players there, but he's playing he's in the lineup regularly. He's in that top 2/3 of the lineup every day. What have you seen from him defensively as far as behind the plate? Because I've heard kind of mixed things.
It's okay. It's not the best arm. He moves well, but I mean, it's like average-ish probably. Nothing has really stood out when I've seen him defensively.
And he's getting work at first base as much as catcher in that lineup too, which part of that is they want to get Hickey reps behind the plate. They want to keep getting Heineman reps behind the plate as the 40-man guy. Gasper, he's like catching twice a week and playing first base and DH 1 to 4 times a week. So he's getting work at positions other than catcher to make sure he gets his bat in the lineup. He even played second recently to start a game. So, I think if a guy were really going to get a look behind the plate in the major leagues, they wouldn't be necessarily doing that with him. They'd be catching him 2, 3, 4 times a week, or 3, 4 times a week. So, but thank you all for your emails again, podcast@soxprospects.com. We want to talk about what you all want to hear about. And Ian, I think that will wrap it up for this episode, unless you've got anything to throw out there. We want to thank you all for listening. Shout out to our producer, Daniel Fox. Hope you're enjoying Europe, my man. You can follow us on social media. You can follow the site @Sox Prospects. Follow Ian @Ian Cundall. That's IANCUNDALL. And follow me @SP Chris Hatfield. Shout out to the Ludlow Thieves for our intro music. All the money, you can find their stuff wherever it is that you listen to music. Thank you to our supporters on patreon.com/SoxProspects and who are supporting the SoxProspects.com donation drive at www.soxprospects.com/donate. We appreciate your support at any level. It doesn't have to be a lot. And any tip you want to throw our way, we'll appreciate it. And our $5 level supporters that we want to thank this particular episode are Steve Patch, Brian Rose, Jake O'Donnell, Alex M. Rivers, John Hershey, Chance Stevenson, Ben Wadman, Andrew Del Rosso, and Brennan Kaizen. And thank you all for your support on the Patreon machine. We'll be back soon with more of the web's best coverage of the Red Sox organization. It's draft time. We're going to have to preview the draft next episode, so that's coming up. Keep your ears to the feed with more of the Sox Prospects podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody.